everybody. Steve here, the retired hobby tech guy. I'm also the American expat who's living in Korea, sold everything, rocking a latte this morning. And today we're going to talk about some experiences that I have gleaned over the years of living in Korea. And we're going to talk about the 10 different types of Korean taxi drivers. Yeah, this is going to be really interesting because, there's been an interesting dynamic in taxi drivers. And for a little bit of background, from 1950 to 1953, Korea was in a war. You might have heard of it, the Korean War. Imagine that. What are the odds? And with that, Korea was basically decimated. It was at the lowest level ever after the war. And it is amazing on how far Korea has come since the Korean War into what we have today. It is probably one of the fastest growing economic countries in the world. In regards to that, it's a testament to the hard work and the perseverance of the Korean people. And it's really cool because they're nice, they're respectful. The crime is extremely low. Again, it's another reason why we opted to retire here in Korea on an F1 and F4 visa, because the wife has Korean ancestry, and there's a whole story behind that. It was interesting because we found out how to do that. But with that, during my time in the military, first time I came to Korea was in 1988, just prior to the Olympics, which was pretty fun. And I've seen public transportation from way back when left a lot to be desired. There wasn't a lot of people that were driving cars, and if they did, they were new car drivers. But not like in the United States, where we learn to drive when we're kids, and then teenagers, we get our learner's permit, and then boom, we're driving. It's kind of ingrained in the American psyche. We drive early and boom, we're good to go. Korea, not so much, because they didn't get introduced to cars like we did in the United States. So you had a lot of older Koreans learning how to drive, and hence I experienced a lot of frustration of driving in Korea. But we're talking about taxi drivers today, so this is going to be an interesting one. The 10 different types of Korean taxi drivers. So let's go ahead and jump right in. Let's see, is that it? Yep, there we go. Pumping the brakes, forward whiplash. This is a thing. This is actually a thing. This is just now, all of these can be one or a combination of all these, which would be horrible in a taxi driver. Pumping the brakes. There's nothing worse than getting into a taxi, telling them, I want to go to AK Plaza or Starfield Mall or wherever you're going to go in Korea, GJ Station or whatever, to catch a train. And you get a taxi driver that loves to pump the brakes. So as you're driving, he's pumping the brakes, and so you're kind of doing this. You're getting that forward whiplash. And it can range in the severity of the pumping of the brakes. I've been in taxis where taxi driver is in the highway. He's a little timid. And so when somebody passes him, he taps the brakes, and you're constantly doing this, and it's like, good Lord. It's not a good thing. So we got pumping the brakes taxi guy. We've got that. We go on to number 2, which is interesting. Pumping the gas. This is the backward whiplash. This is where, you're sitting and you're looking, and instead of pumping the brakes, he's pumping the gas. So you're doing this. He's like, and then he slows down and kind of coasts a little bit. And you're just like, seriously. Pumping the gas taxi driver is not fun, because instead of using the brake, instead of letting it smooth out or even set the cruise control or anything like that, no, it's pumping the gas, and it just ends up it's jarring. And if you have a long taxi drive with any of these taxi drivers, except for a couple of them, it can be a horrible experience. Let's go on to number 3, the speed demon. This, I remember being in Korea and getting into taxis where there were speed demons, but they followed the traffic laws, and then they slowed down for speed bumps. Unfortunately, there's a lot of older taxi drivers now because of the economy. So you have a lot of old people that haven't really driven a lot, who are getting brand new cars, and they think that, I got to make more money, I got to go fast. oh, look, a speed bump, boom, and you end up catching air, or maybe not, maybe I'm exaggerating, but I have been in a number of taxis where the speed demon taxi driver goes off, hits a speed bump to the point of where it raises me off the seat and my head hits the headliner in the back of the taxi, strains the neck, and it's just like, whoa, slow down, chun chun hee. I mean, let's relax. There's no need to, have a cervical injury. Unfortunately, again, a lot of these older taxi drivers that are coming in and becoming taxi drivers today are doing stuff like this. And while I appreciate getting somewhere quickly, you have to slow down for speed bumps. It's just Alan A says, "Hey brother, you are well. How are you? How you are well? Yes, I'm well, except when I ride in some of these taxis, and yeah, it. Like I said, I was in a speed taxi one time. Dude hit the speed bump, and a couple of times it was just like head going up on the headliner. Strained my neck, and for the next couple of days, I had to use the massage gun on my neck because it did cause a strain and a muscle pull on my neck. So, yeah, needless to say, when I got out of the taxi that did that, slammed the door with much force too, because he didn't want to listen. So, uh, yeah, it's a thing. So let's carry on. We're talking about number 4, the timid driver. Oh my gosh, these taxi drivers. We just had one of these the other day, and again, it's an older Odyssey, an older Korean guy who obviously needs to work, so he decides, I'll buy a car, I'll get the little map thing, and get into the taxi network. Somebody, and he takes the call and picks you up, and the next thing you know, you're on the highway, which is 100 kilometers an hour, and this dude is doing like 70, and everybody's going around him. And when somebody passes him, he's kind of veering off a little bit, because he's scared and timid. That can be, the exact opposite of the speed demon, but that really will clench it'll make you pucker, because he's not going with the flow of traffic, and you have cars that are going 100 and you're going 70 or 60 kilometers an hour, and they come up on him. I've seen it just looking in the rear view mirrors as being in a taxi, and cars have had to, because they're not paying attention, they're just going fast. Yeah, that can be scary. So the timid driver, somebody who just got their license, decides that they need to be a taxi driver, doesn't drive the speed limit, and they come to lights, and anybody that does anything at all, whether it's out of the ordinary or not, they're cautious, and and they actually become, that's an accident waiting to happen right there. So that's number 4. Let's take a look at the jerky steering. I didn't think this was a thing, and I've got a number of years in Korea. The jerky steering is something we recently experienced, I would say about a week ago. And I would call this the sideways seasickness. Yeah, this is really interesting because we had an older taxi driver, older. He had gray hair, older. It wasn't like gray hair dyed black taxi driver type of guy. No, this was like old gray, where he doesn't even care about his hair anymore. That can be a sign. That can be a red flag. I don't know. Sometimes it is, sometimes it's not. So the jerky driver, this old Odyssey was maybe 4'5". He's got the seat all the way up. It's like he's like this, and it's just small, tiny old man. God bless him. But as we're going down the highway, he's jerking. So he jerks this way, and then as you're in between the lines, he's going towards this on the line. He's getting ready to cross over, and then he jerks over to overcorrect, and then he goes the other way. Then he jerks this way, then he jerks this way, and it's just like every 3 or 4 seconds he's jerking, and so the car is lurching as it goes, and you're getting the sideways whiplash and the seasickness because it's not smooth. It's just like, don't overcorrect. Don't jerk the wheel. Just kind of, just kind of nice and easy. Kind of just chill out. Put your hand on top there, and just kind. You can even just use your fingers. I usually drive with my fingers. Just kind of do this. Get your head out of the gutter. But yeah, it is absolutely crazy. The jerking steering taxi driver is the one that was just, oh my gosh, seriously. And again, that was about a 10, it was about a 10 or a 15-minute taxi ride. And whether it was in the city or whether it was on the highway and, over jerking and just kind of like your head's going this, and I actually got seasick. It was a thing. So from that, we're going to drive on. Did you get the pun? If you did, be sure to like and subscribe and give yourself a thumbs up because, yeah, you got the pun. The clueless Kim. Yeah, the clueless Kim. This is the elderly taxi driver who somehow got his license, took the test, the written test, the driving test. They have those things here in Korea, but then basically forgets everything that he studied and passed. And basically, it's like traffic laws. There's traffic laws. We had one of those, and it was disconcerting because the fact that the lines on the road, no, it doesn't matter. Lights, no. Oh, I missed the turn. I'm just going to stop in the middle of traffic. And like this happened last night, the Korean taxi driver. Now, here's the thing. Good Lord. So we're driving. It is busy. It's Friday. It's rush hour. We had just finished dinner, and there's a bunch of traffic on the road, and everybody's serious about all this. So anyway, it ends up we're driving. Adashi is supposed to go to the right, or at least he thought it was, but actually on his navigation system, we weren't supposed to go right until about another 100 meters down the road, but he tried to go right. And then instead of, going right and then just doing a U-turn and go back, and no, he stops in the middle of the traffic. And thank God the drivers behind us swerved and almost hit our taxi. So he's like, oh, and then he puts his four ways on, and we're in the middle of traffic, and he's in the intersection, and he's kind of half in, half out. There's other cars. When he swerved into the right, there's cars that are parked or, waiting for the light to go. He almost hit somebody there. It was just like, that might have been the last meal that we had last night. And it's just like, he's like, oh, I thought it was here, and, in Korean. And it's just like, oh my gosh, seriously. Clueless Kim taxi drivers are probably one of the worst because they don't know where they're going, even though they have a navigation system that shows you exactly where you need to go, but they're not experienced enough with the navigation system to say, oh, okay, well, there's a space between here and where the turn is, and my taxi is the little dot that's here. If you can't figure out and follow the highlighted line, I don't know what to tell you. It's the clueless camp. So it's kind of a combination of that and traffic laws. Who cares? Stop signs, whatever. It's almost like he was surprised that lights would turn red. And that people were honking at him because he was swerving and not staying between the lines, which is another category of taxi drivers. That's it. But clueless Kims are probably the worst, and because they put your life in danger, and the fact that it's a doozy. Okay, let's drive on. And again, can't color. Yeah, the can't color driver, and I equate this that they can't stay between the lines. Driving is like coloring. If you stay between the lines, and you can do whatever you want as long as you're between the lines. And with that, we talked about the jerky steering guy. At least he stayed between the lines. Sure, he jerked, and it's kind of got that side seasickness motion and a little bit of neck strain, but he stayed between the lines. So, I got to give him kudos for that. For the people that can't stay between the lines, they're drifting over. Other cars are honking because he's not paying attention. Again, the older Korean drivers that decide to be taxi drivers that don't have a lot of experience driving, period. I think you should have a little bit more experience. You instead of just, well, I got my license, and Lord knows they don't drive a lot, but they decide to buy a new car and do the whole taxi thing. If you can't stand and stay between the lines, you probably shouldn't be a taxi driver. because one, you're putting other people's lives at risk because you're wandering into other lanes of traffic on the highway. For example, I remember this one guy, he just kind of drift, and he wouldn't jerk, and he would just slowly go back. But if you're on the highway and you're going 100, the speed limit's 100 kilometers an hour, but in that far left hand lane, people are going 150, 170 because there's no speed cameras or whatever. So boom, people get in that left lane and go. This guy's is wandering into that left lane as traffic is behind us, going obscene speeds, and they're honking, flashing their lights, and these and just kind of driving Miss Daisy type of thing. Those are the type of drivers that I don't like to be taxi drivers. The next one we have is the angry bird driver. Bro is mad at the world for being a taxi driver. These people are, I don't get these people. I understand being a taxi driver isn't something a lot of people dream about. Oh, when I get old and I want to be a taxi driver. I understand it. I get it. We all work jobs that we don't like. It's very rare that you find somebody who works a job that loves what they do. If you can do that, that's awesome. But the angry bird taxi driver, what he ends up doing is basically getting to the point of where he's angry at the world and he takes it out on the other drivers. He's yelling and cussing. And it's a really frustrating drive. And, along with this, the angry bird driver can also engage you in conversation, and he can be mad about politics. He can be mad about his home life. He can be mad about, work and so on and so forth. And they will let you know. And I really don't like being in the angry bird taxis because it just sucks the life out of you. Now I'm not a pacifist and think, well, if somebody cuts me off, I'm just going to be, hey, whatever, no big deal. Go ahead, cut in front of me, cause me to lock up my brakes. Just go ahead. I'm not one of those guys. I would be pissed at that too. But when you're constantly pissed and the taxi driver is always angry and it's almost like, dude, you need therapy? Yeah, you probably shouldn't be a taxi driver. Okay, so that's number 8. We're going to get to number 9, the crazy driver. Now, I experienced a lot of these when I was in Korea in the early 80s or late 80s, early 90s, and you jump in the taxi. Now, these taxi drivers are like NASCAR drivers. They are like F1 drivers, and they're pedal to the metal. You're going to get to where you're going to go, but you're going to be in fear for your life. You ever seen those videos where you see like the lady, she wants to test drive a car, and they have the car salesman, and she's like a professional race car drifter or whatever, and they go out onto the track and she's drifting, and the guy's like, whoa, he's going crazy and everything. Those are the type of crazy drivers. But they are in a league of their own. They can get you from point A to point B. You will be puckering up and grabbing the sides, and you're going to be tightening up that seatbelt across and holding on to it. But they will get you there. And they can be happy, and they can be go-lucky. And they can also have the mentality of, they got the gloves on, the driving gloves. And when I see somebody doing this with the driving gloves, it's like, oh, we've got the crazy driver. It's like a roller coaster ride. You're going to be in fear for your life, but you know that you're going to make it and there's not going to be an accident. And we'll go so fast. It'll be, you look on your phone and the app and it'll take 10 minutes. No, he's there in 5.2 minutes. It's those type of drivers. Little exciting, but you're going to get there safe. So, the crazy taxi drivers in Korea, death-defying, but good. It's kind of like watching a horror movie or a scary movie or a thriller. You're like, but you enjoy the experience. So there's that. We're going to get to this crazy one, number 10, the good driver, the safe, the quick, the efficient, the nice, the friendly, the personal Korean taxi driver, whether he is young or old, will welcome you into his cab and engage in some conversation. Oh, you American. Oh, very nice, like America, and some of them don't speak English, but they're very nice. And annyeonghaseyo, takeji ne shibika, oh, kujo kure, all of this, they say all these things to welcome you into the taxi. And they're safe. They're like the best safe drivers I've ever experienced. They're quick and they don't do any of the things that we talked about the last nine. They're follow the laws. They don't pump the brakes. They don't jerk the get, pump the gas. They don't jerk around the steering wheel. Their job has been so refined and they take such pride in the work of being a taxi driver. It's like being chauffeured by a high-end chauffeur. And it's at a time where you can get in a taxi and you're just like, I can relax. I can actually take a nap. I am not in fear for my life. I don't have to worry because this gentleman here, again, being young or old, he has got it going on, and you obviously give these people 5 stars. They will actually, be helpful in the conversations. They don't overburden you like the angry bird taxi driver who's mad at the world. They're like, hey, where are you going? Okay. And then, they don't force their opinions on you. It's just truly a wonderful chauffeur experience. Those are the taxi drivers that I love here in Korea. With that being said, other taxi drivers, when we get to Korea, there are some subcategories, just as with anything else. So these are some of the bonus or the subcategories. You have the taxi drivers that are in the middle of summer, which the temperature can get into the high 90s, low hundreds with 80-90% humidity. You're dying just sitting there because of the heat and you're sweating. You taxi pulls up, you get in, there's no AC. And Adashi, the taxi driver, is wearing a long sleeve shirt with a sweater vest, and you're wondering how he is not sweating bullets. I remember getting into a taxi like this, and it was just like, oh my gosh. And he wanted the windows up. He didn't, this was summer, it was August. He wanted the windows up, and oh my gosh. It was like I point to the AC, and he said, AC, aircon, opsoyo. And so saying that the air conditioner is obviously broken, that was probably one of the more memorable taxi rides I've had because it was so hot. By the time I left, when we got to our destination, luckily it was only like about 5 or 7 minutes away, which wasn't too bad. It was a long stretch of highway. But so we finished and got out, and Lord, I was sweating bullets and couldn't even open the window. I don't know. At that time, I was a young soldier here in Korea, and he didn't want me to open the window. I'm sweating profusely. It's dry. It's dripping down my face. My shirt is getting soaked. You can see the lines of sweat and perspiration just popping up all over my shirt, and it's just like I could feel the sweat going down the crack of your. Yeah, it was that type of sweat, just sweating bullets. And so when I got up to leave, I gave Odyssey the money because back then you had to pay money. Now you can pay with your card or your cell phone and stuff like this. But as I got up, I looked behind me and it's just like the seat was drenched in sweat because I swear it must have been 115, 120 degrees. And he's wearing a sweater vest with a long sleeve shirt. And then you have the people that have no heat, another subcategory of taxi drivers, which it can be absolutely freezing. And this is not so much a problem these days, but in the olden days when I was here, like before I was married, and even when I was a young married man, we would get in taxis and no heat. Odyssey is, and this will give you a clue. It's a red flag. If the taxi pulls up, it's the dead of winter. You're freezing, and you're like, "Oh, I can't wait to get into a warm taxi." And then Odyssey is in like these puffy winter pants, and then he's got like the shirt and the vest and a jacket, and he's wearing a hat, and he's got gloves like he's going out on an Arctic expedition. Yeah, you're gonna be cold. So there's a few times that I've experienced that. You get in the taxi, and it's like, ooh, chua, chua, cold, and then you point to the heater, and he's just, again, I'm so, and he does his little driving thing, and you're just freezing. At least the window's not open, the AC's not on, but it's still or you have the other thing is too much heat. And this usually happens it's not so much the winter that you get too much heat, but it happens during the summer. And for some reason, I mean, there's a physiological reason as why Koreans don't sweat as much. There's something in some gene or DNA or whatever that little chromosome is flicked off, so they don't sweat as much as Americans. And of course, when we sweat or other people, sometimes your sweat will smell, and that's why we have deodorant. Korea, yeah, they really don't do deodorant because they don't need it, and my wife doesn't need deodorant. She's like, "What are you doing?" And I said, "Well, it's early in a newlywed couple as we were shopping, and I go to the deodorant, get deodorant." She goes, "What's that?" And I said, "Well, it's deodorant." She's like, "What's that for?" And it's like, "Well, you put it in your underarms because you sweat, and you sweat and you don't have it, it's going to smell bad, and of course you got to take a shower. If you don't shower, it's going to be even worse." So explain that to her, and she's like, what do you mean? What do you mean smell bad?" And it's like, at that time, as a young married couple and married to a Korean, I didn't know this was a thing in Korea. Yeah, a lot of people don't do deodorant because they don't sweat and they don't smell. I guess you could say their shit don't stink. I mean, but yeah, very, very interesting. So, yeah, interesting dynamic. But during the summer, you will get taxi drivers or bus drivers where you get on the bus and you're sweating your cojones off. You get onto the bus or into the taxi, and next thing you know, it's like, it's hot. It's hot. And they have the heater going. Sometimes this happens in the winter where you're bundled up because it's cold outside, and then you step in the bus or the public transportation taxi, whatever it is, and they've got the heater blowing. Again, obviously he's got the long pants, the shirt, the sweater vest, the jacket on top of that, and a hat, and he's driving. He could be the bus driver. Mostly I find it with bus drivers, but they will have the heat going, and I have seen it to where the heat inside the bus was so hot that other Koreans were like fanning themselves. It was just like, good Lord, I know we don't sweat, but he's really pushing the limit here. So that's another category. And probably the worst category for Korean taxi drivers is being the new driver. Whether you're young or old, the new taxi driver can have a lot of the problems that we just discussed with the different types of taxi drivers. And while they have well meaning and good intentions in their heart to be a taxi driver, to be employed, which I don't hold that against anybody, but they're just new. Um, and that's not too bad because over time, these new drivers will become more experienced and they'll be more professional. Eventually, they'll rise to the level of that chauffeur status and being the ultimate taxi driver that you're comfortable. You could take a nap in the taxi, nothing jarring, no seasickness, no whiplash. They stay between the lines and the heat and the AC, the atmosphere and the comfort level inside the taxi is absolutely perfect. They'll get to the point where they ask you, "Oh, is it too hot? Is it too cold? Would you like more air?" Pointing out some things. Those are the taxi drivers that the new ones should aspire to be. So they have those. Um, Here's another interesting thing when we're talking about Korean taxi drivers is that here in Korea recently, since we've been here, we retired here, we're just past 2.5 years. And what we've noticed because of the poor economy here in Korea, there's a lot of seniors, older Koreans who are opting to be taxi drivers because you just need a car, you just need a license, and you get a little thing, and boom, you're a taxi driver. It's pretty easy to do that. There's apps and things like that, but a lot of these older drivers are not experienced. So when they become taxi drivers, they can become a number or a combination of any and all of those 10 types of drivers. So, yeah, there's that. It's just a wild and crazy thing that we end up seeing with taxi drivers. And it's an interesting dynamic of what we end up seeing. So, but recently, I think the problem is because the economy is going so bad and because Koreans, their retirement age is, in the late 60s, almost 70, a lot of them choose to work until they hit and can get their retirement. And even then, there's some articles that I've been reading here in Korea where a lot of seniors can't afford to retire for a number of reasons, kind of like in the United States. They didn't save enough for retirement or didn't save anything at all. They just relied on the pension, which isn't enough because that hasn't kept pace with the rise in the cost of goods and services. So they have to continue to be employed in some way, shape, or form or have a second job. Hence, becoming a taxi driver is, oh, that will solve all the problems. Um, yeah. And wait until you get the taxi driver, the new older taxi driver who has a combination of these different types of traits of taxi drivers. Maybe it's pumping the brakes, maybe it's the swerving, maybe it's the doesn't know the traffic laws, maybe, all of the bad taxi traits rolled into one driver. You have the spawn of Satan that will send you to hell if you ever get into an accident, because it is the perfect storm, the culmination of everything bad in a taxi driver. And I've had taxi drivers where they've had two or three, I think, if I think back, maybe four of the bad categories of taxi drivers rolled into one, and that can be scary. I wouldn't want to have any more than that. Three or four, but usually, thankfully, for what we've experienced, it's just been they have one bad trait. They pump the brakes, or they'll pump the gas, or they'll be the jerky driver, or they're clueless as to the traffic laws. But if you have like somebody who doesn't know the traffic laws, they're the jerky driver, they're pumping the brakes, and so on and so forth, that can be really taxing. Did you get that pun? I knew you would. I knew you would. It's the puns are everywhere. It just rolls off the tongue. Roll, wheel, taxi. Did you get that one? Okay. I know it's a dad joke. So anyway, yeah, taxi drivers in Korea. There's 10 different types, and unfortunately, as a lot of older drivers or a lot of older people are becoming taxi drivers, I'm seeing a lot more of the bad taxi drivers, and hopefully they'll get experienced over time. It doesn't mean it's kind of like you can't teach an old dog new tricks. You can, but a lot of old dogs are just like screw it, and that's kind of problematic because as you get older, we do know, no matter if you're in Korea or the United States or any other country, you will find out that driving for older people can be a problem and it can cause accidents. And I'm really kind of concerned sometimes for some of the drivers that have been taxi drivers for us, and it makes me wonder, it's only going to get worse as we go on with the poor economy that we have in Korea right now. It's driving more people to do second jobs, that's a testament to their hard work ethic and doing what they need to do to survive and to, maybe help fund retirement or whatever. Some people just work until they die because they just don't want to retire. Some people, the husband and the wife, and then one of them retires, and then they both retire, and then they can't stand each other, so the one spouse goes back to work. There's probably some of that going on here in Korea, just like it is in the United States. So anyway, the 10 different types of Korean taxi drivers, very interesting, can be very disconcerting at times. Sometimes you'll have the white knuckle ride where you're like, oh my gosh, I hope I get to my destination. And you wonder if it's like, am I going to go to heaven first, or am I going to actually get to the train station? I'm not sure. Very, very interesting. And with that, public transportation, since we're on this, taxi drivers, but then you have bus drivers. Bus drivers, this is kind of the bonus, I guess, a bonus part, rant of the video. Bus drivers back in the day were rough. Back in the 80s, early 90s, Korean bus drivers were, and back then, the rules of the road there was very little rules. I mean, even though there was driving laws on the books in Korea, if there was 2 lanes of traffic going this way and 2 lanes going the opposite way, Korea would make 4 or 5 lanes out of those 2 lanes. And who cares about lines on a road? Who cares about lights? We're going to run lights. We're going to do whatever we want. It was truly the wild, wild west of driving. It wasn't as bad as like Bangkok or some other cities, but it ranked up there with pretty harrowing experiences of driving. But public transportation, like bus drivers, Back then, it used to be that the larger the vehicle, the more right of way you had. So buses were kind of up there. The only thing about buses were the big construction vehicles, the big, huge dump trucks that were make buses look small. They had ultimately the right of way, regardless of lights, whether it was green or red, no turn, no U turn, whatever. Trucks would do whatever they would want to do. And it was kind of an unwritten rule. Whenever you saw a big truck, it was like, you're bigger than me, so you have the right of way. And it doesn't matter if they break traffic laws. If you could wrap your head around that concept, then you could be okay here in Korea for driving. But very, and when I was driving in Korea in the military, I was always in a military vehicle. So it's like if there's a wreck, if there's a crash, not my vehicle, that's a U.S. Army. So, and at that time, I thought I was invincible. I didn't, I thought if I got in a wreck, who cares? I'm young, I'm strong, I'm whatever. But when you get to the bus drivers, they're kind of like that as well. But the good thing is now with public transportation, especially with the newer buses that they have, we have more qualified and experienced bus drivers here in Korea that are driving the electric buses, the brand new buses with the really cushiony seats, which is nice. And then they gradually come to a stop and let people off and on. And then they slowly pick up speed and they go. And it's not like the old bus drivers where it's like, there's a bus stop coming. You've been doing this route for years, and yet you still stop and go speed. Oh, we're going fast, and oh, there's the bus stop. Let me slam on the brakes. And when people get on the bus and just before they sit down, what does the bus driver do? Slams onto the gas pedal. So people are like jerking and falling and stuff. And it's like he's got a timetable and you better hurry up and sit down. That was kind of an unwritten rule during, riding buses in Korea way back when. But it's gotten a lot better now. So the problem is like the wife, she ended up going and doing some stuff, whatever the wife does with her stuff. And she took some time for herself. So she rides the city bus. And the one bus that she got on was the brand new electric bus. Bus driver's really cool. The atmosphere, the temperature was great. Not too hot, not too cold. Great driving, stayed between the lines. It was a very comfortable ride. She almost fell asleep, because she was so comfortable. Great. But then when she got to Pyeongtaek and bought some things, she got onto a bus to return. That was an old bus, a bus that probably should have been retired 10 years ago. Falling apart, rickety windows, the windows don't open. Odyssey didn't have the air conditioning on because maybe there wasn't even air conditioning. It wasn't working, but people were actually, she was telling me people were actually fanning and the old people were fanning themselves. And it's like, finally somebody's like going around to the windows and try until they finally found a window that actually would go down to get some air circulation. And it's like, give that person the gold medal for opening the window. You're my hero. But the same thing, the shocks were out on it, hard braking, it just, jerking movements and, just slamming the gas pedal down when you leave the bus stop. She said it was just a horrible bus ride back. So as time goes on, and we have a declining population because we have a lot of old people and the following generations are not, we don't have a lot of those. I don't know. People are saying, well, the AI taxi and the automatic, driverless taxis, robot taxis or whatever you want to call them. It's like, oh, those are going to take jobs away. And it's like, well, as the old people die off, which we all will, we won't have as many young people as we did old people because the following generations get smaller and smaller and smaller, and nobody wants to have kids anymore, which is a concern here in Korea, Japan, and other countries. Maybe driverless taxis are the way to go. And then you don't get the gas pumping taxi driver. You don't get the jerky taxi driver. As a matter of fact, it's interesting because I just read an article on how Elon Musk is having Teslas that are going to be driverless taxis for a flat rate of like, what is it, $4.12 or whatever. That's going to undercut anything that any other taxi company or, like Grab or Lyft or, things like that, they're going to drive them out of business. And his company is going to get rich over that. And the companies that use technology and use AI and use, think about it. Think about it. It's going to be huge. Why would you want to have a driver and you don't? It's kind of like, in Vegas, you roll the dice and pray that you get a good taxi driver. All of that's going to go away when we have these driverless taxis. And yeah, it's going to be like the Jetsons, you just get in and you go and you don't have to drive, you don't have to worry, you don't have to do anything. It's just boom, we're getting there. We are getting there. So, yeah, those are the 10 types of taxi drivers here in Korea. And you might see some of these in places where you live. So, if what type of experiences with public transportation have you had? Taxi drivers, city bus drivers, um, Lyft, Grab, whatever it is, the taxi app services that you do, whether it's in the United States or overseas in some other country, put your experiences down. What was the worst taxi drive that you ever experienced? Put that in the comment section down below because I'd like to see that and share your experiences in that. And yeah, some good stuff. So anyway, with that being said, we're gonna finish this up and we're going to close out this video. And again, as we're on the end screen here, please like and subscribe to the channel. I would really appreciate that. I really would. If you want to contact me directly, there's my email address. I answer every single person. So whether it's related to 3D printing, painting miniatures, being an American expat in Korea, hey, by the way, I got some questions on how you got your visas or what is your budget and what do you experience in Korea? Or you just want to say hi, there's the email address. The scrolling ticker down here at the bottom, those are the cool, awesome people who have bought me coffee, and you can do the same by clicking the link in the description box. If you don't, that's cool, but at least like and subscribe. I would really appreciate it. That would be the greatest thing that you could do. So anyway, thank you for watching. I appreciate that. And even though we only got a few comments, no problem. I understand. Here in Korea, it's early morning. It's 7:44 on a Saturday, which means it's probably Friday-ish in the United States in some places. But yeah, love to hear what you think and what is the worst taxi drive that you've had. So with that being said, I'm going to go ahead and sign off, and we will see you on the next video. All right? Peace. Thanks for watching. Good that you came by.